Good morning again. I think now we are ready to start the formal session. The video I promised you will come a little bit later, as you realize. So welcome to this closing session. I have this morning the pleasure to have with me co-chair, who is Ms. Subida Aloa from the World Bank. She is the Director of Finance, Economics and Urban Development, all the areas that were so important for us in this discussion, and also overseeing and representing, of course, the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, the organizers of the World Reconstruction Conference this morning. Subida will shortly also make some comments to you. I'd like to thank you all and share some reflections on this week of work with you. No one has come to me and said they were not satisfied, so I take it that all of you who have said this was a great event are satisfied and that you reflect the Vox Populi here. There were more than 2,500 people who came to the meeting, which is, of course, an extraordinary volume. And it was very clear that you didn't come here just to talk. There was a very strong consensus emerging out of this meeting. Not only that this is a unique global forum, because we had mayors, parliamentarians, governments, local governments, science, children. We had private sector for the first time significantly present. So you all came here to exchange, to learn, to get ideas, to build very significantly new partnerships, and to seek inspiration and a sense of, I think you, like me, wanted to test, are we now on the same page? Do we have a strong consensus? Do we agree on what the major priorities and issues are, irrespective of maybe what country we come from and what community we do reflect? And I hope you, like me, have found that that was really maybe the main unique sense about this event. We've moved from 2005 to 2007 to 2009, and every time we learned something new, we had debate, we shifted a bit the priorities. But this time I just have a very strong impression that we have reached a turning point in the work for disaster risk reduction globally. And the challenge that we are now faced with is how to reach the next turning point. What's the direction for the next years? What should the overriding focus be? How do we assist countries, local communities, and the people who have merged here to optimize really the years that are coming in terms of reducing risk? I have really sensed an enormous focus and concrete actions, listening to the plenary statements here, the official statements. We're taking careful note of all the ideas and proposals, and everything will be reflected in the much larger document than the 4 pages that you have in front of you. And it will certainly provide a basis for the work that we will do as ISDR and you and ISDR, but I also hope the work that you will do at home in regional organizations and in the various groups that have gathered here during these 4 or 5 days. So there is a strong sense of determination coming out of this, a sense of clarity, not always comfort with what is ahead of us. You remember on Tuesday morning, one of the speakers said we have to look over the horizon. And definitely we have to look over that horizon together, not in sectors or in separate venues. We have to be fairly clear-eyed about what we are going, where we are going. Those of you who participated in the endorsement of HFA in 2005, I hope, like some of us who are a bit newer to this, that you really feel that you come such a long way, that the work process during this week has fully endorsed the HFA principles, that there's clear framework for action, that it's a necessary and guiding instrument for action, and we are now ready to develop it further and be more precise. There have been many calls for setting norms, standards, and guiding principles that with great precision will assist all of us to move into tomorrow and over that horizon that may be coming. You heard the Secretary General of United Nations. There is no doubt about his commitment. He is also worried, as I think he expressed, and he has taken some very precise, specific initiatives, not least when it comes to technological accidents and nuclear plants. But we are also asking him, as an outcome of this meeting, that he sets up an eminent panel, a panel of eminent experts on disaster risk reduction to assist in mapping what that on the other side of the horizon future can look like. What should the focus be? What are the key elements of a new Hyogo framework for action? Here I have particularly been very pleased with the participation of the private sector group here. It's the first time they really join us seriously. They have been working really hard for preparing for this event, and I think they have been at your disposal fully to develop ideas and exchanges, and I do look forward to see even more of them in the future. We had the children here, and they have this time come forward with a declaration and with 5 principles or 5 calls that they are making. And I think they are becoming a very influential and present group in this working partnership that we have within the ISDR. We have had the reconstruction authorities for the first time, thanks to the Recovery and Reconstruction Conference, being very present with the voice, and through that contribution we are probably for the first time taking a significant step towards that integration that is a bit complicated in our own community between those short-term impetus of disasters with the long-term planning and resource allocations that we are normally discussing here. We've had the community groups who are, I know, very comfortable in this environment, that have a voice like everybody else here, and that their work is helping us to really bridge that gap of understanding. Beyond saying local level action is important, how does it play out? Where do resources come from? Who are the people you engage? Who is the voice of local level? And finally, I think the main call that was there in Hyogo Framework for Action, the main call that has been coming out of this meeting is for political leadership. And we've been working to try to package what the political leadership can take on from what we are saying are significant and critical priorities. And I believe, you can tell me if you agree, but I believe that this meeting over the week has provided the contents in that package that we can offer. We had the commitment of the President of Indonesia. We'd also have commitments of other heads of states. We have commitments of other senior government officials to carry this work on. So this work will be carried on now in regional organizations, at regional level and within the UN. And it's incumbent on us to fill the boxes, the packages that we will ask our political leaders to take forward with us, so that they can feel that they have a chance to deliver. With these introductory thoughts, I will pass the floor to Zubida, and then we will go into listening to you about the chair's summary. Zubida, please.
Thank you very much, Margareta. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very delighted to be here joining Margareta in reporting back to you on this week of discussion that linked the World Reconstruction Conference, the first ever conference on reconstruction, with the UN platform for Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. We jointly, UNSDR and the World Bank and the Global Facility for Disaster Risk Reduction, decided to hold this conference within the UN Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction for a number of reasons. One was that we wanted to contribute to the carbon footprint, as one of my colleagues in UNSDR said, since having you all here was a good reason for us not to try and do something else elsewhere. But more importantly, we wanted to lead by example. We wanted to show that talking about partnerships, that is extremely important, is not just talking, as Margareta said, but it's acting. Because when we act together, we do far better. We are far more effective in helping our countries that are disaster-prone recover from disasters. And so that's the reason why we held it at the same time. The second reason why we felt the World Reconstruction Conference had to be held at this time as well was the body of evidence that we have at our disposal. The joint World Bank and UN report on the economics of disasters, many of you have gone to the session on May 11th, showed that with experience and evidence from more than 90 countries and spanning a period of more than 45 years, that in fact countries continue to be affected by the disasters more than 5 years after the disasters. So in fact, growth doesn't recover quickly 5 years after that. And of course, you saw all the numbers that were given about the lost lives, the lost infrastructure, the lost incomes. And you know that the poor are the ones that are hit the worst during disasters. So that was a reason to call for action, to organize this World Reconstruction Conference, because we said this is the time now to learn from the lessons of the past. Because one of the, we realized disaster after disaster that in fact we're not learning as fast as we should. And so that's the reason why we said this is the time to get together, reflect on what we have learned, use the evidence that we have accumulated through our experiences together, and agree on a global framework with, as Margareta said, accepted standards and clear roles and responsibilities between the various institutions. We all have a lot of expertise, whether it's local authorities, national governments, UNSDR, the World Bank, the Global Facility for Disaster Risk Reduction. And so this is the time for us to use this opportunity to agree on a global framework for reconstruction. And this is what the World Reconstruction Conference was about. If recovery is done right, as we have seen through the evidence, it provides faster results with higher quality and less costs. It's an opportunity for sustainable development, since it's also an entry point for policy dialogue and long-term risk mitigation. It's also a platform to show the strong linkages between reconstruction and long-term disaster risk reduction. And as I said, it's also part of the development process. Discussion, as you saw from the beginning, at the opening session to yesterday at the closing session, covered a number of issues. In fact, 13 thematic sessions, 3 roundtables, and a high-level policy panel with over 100 speakers from 30 countries and 80 institutions made this a truly global event. There was also an innovation competition where we wanted together to show how important it was to strengthen local capacity. And we saw that civil society organizations and the private sector have a lot of experience in helping in reconstruction and recovery using local material and local capacities. And so we selected 3 winners, young winners that have proposed ideas on how to help villages and local communities in many of the remote areas reconstruct after disasters using local material. And innovation is very important, as you know. So the in-depth discussion at the conference, in fact, we were very, very pleased to see that a consensus emerged from these discussions. I myself took part in many of the discussions, so did Margareta and many of our colleagues from UNHCR and the World Bank and the Global Facility, as well as from many of our bilateral donors who generously provide financing to help in this reconstruction and to help countries recover from disasters. And they are expecting us to develop this framework to show results of what they're financing. And many of you know that many countries are under very tight fiscal situations, and they continue to help. And so we owe it to them, we owe it to those affected by disasters, that we develop also frameworks to monitor our activities, to monitor the effectiveness of the reconstruction programs. And so that consensus on developing a global framework for reconstruction asked for defining better roles and responsibilities within clear institutional arrangements. As Margareta said, we are still struggling with defining the roles between the short-term immediate help following disasters and the strategies for reconstruction that are the foundations for sustainable development. They've also asked for effectively capitalizing on the strength of each stakeholders, on clearly placing countries in the driver's seat on decision-making and resource allocation, as well as providing in-time relevant knowledge and lessons learned, and assisting in the establishment of a robust and transparent quality and results monitoring systems. Many discussed in the sessions about how to reconcile putting the decision-making process and the resource allocation in the country's strategies, and how to let countries, national government, local authorities drive the reconstruction process, but at the same time develop a transparent and accountable monitoring system. So that's an important point also that came and on which many agreed. The second important consensus that emerged from these discussions was improving systems and instruments for recovery and reconstruction finance. A lot of discussion, including the discussion at the high-level policy panel, where our managing director, Srimulyani Indrawati, and Commissioner for the European Union, Kristalina Georgieva, and representative from the global civil organization of civil society that's involved in disaster risk reduction, as well as a representative from the global insurance industry, all called for providing access to reliable reconstruction finance, and asked that we work to develop instruments to better tap the financial capacity of the global capital market. The third important result of this conference was establishing a global reconstruction and recovery knowledge practice, linking practitioners and providing open access to data and information. And that is also an important part of this global framework, is that we put information on the table, that we open access to the information, because that is what will guide the reconstruction process and will better inform policymakers in the countries affected by disasters, but also us, the institutions that are helping, as well as the donors who finance some of that reconstruction effort. And so we, at the World Bank, in the Global Facility, have committed, together with our colleague at UNHCR and many of our other partners, including the private sector. As Margareta said, we were very pleased to see how engaged the private sector was. Many have donated resources and volunteered their time to help us develop new tools to better assess damages. Many of you have seen how in Haiti with the help of Google and others, we were able to better assess the damages of the buildings and others than we would have otherwise. So we count on them as well to join us in this effort to develop this global framework for reconstruction. And that is why we have agreed that we would form a working group after this conference that would involve the key partners in this endeavor and would lead the work that would define this framework and define this knowledge platform for the disaster recovery and reconstruction. And that is what we hope to be able to come back to you with at some point in the future to agree on, to see if we can reach quickly a consensus on this global framework. Thank you very much for all your support, your contributions, as well as your feedback, which has been very helpful to both Margarita, myself, and our teams, and we will take that forward. And we would like to thank also the teams on both sides, on both UNSDR and the Global Facility for Disaster Risk Reduction at the World Bank. As Margarita said, many of them were up to 6 a.m. this morning trying to make sure to capture all the discussion of the platform, the global platform, as well as the World Reconstruction Conference, and put the summary in front of you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Subida. The rest of the session will now go in the following order. Since we only have this draft summary in English, I will test the patience of the English speakers here and read it out so it can be translated into all the languages here. Hopefully it will not take too long time, but it had to be done carefully. So thank you for your support to that. After that, we will invite, it's a fairly significant line of people here. They are individuals who have been either designated or taken it on them to represent different groups, different stakeholder groups or communities, who will give you a very short presentation of two things: their commitment and their takeaway from this meeting. What's going to happen next? All elements of an action plan. There are 11 of them. After that, when you have been inspired both with what they say and your own reflection, we will open the floor and take your comments on the draft chair summary. Is that okay? Good, thank you. So this is the draft chair summary dated 13 of May 2011. Third session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction and the World Reconstruction Conference, Geneva, 8 to 13 of May 2011. The third session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction and the World Reconstruction Conference met in Geneva, 8 to 13 May 2011. It was opened by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and chaired by the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations. This platform brought together the broadest ever cross-section of people committed to building resilience. Several heads of state, ministers, the managing director of the World Bank, more than 2,600 delegates representing 168 governments, 25 intergovernmental organizations, 65 non-governmental organizations, parliamentarians, private sector, local government, academic institutions, and civil society and international organizations came together from all over the world around the theme, Invest Today for a Safer Tomorrow, Increase Investment in Local Action. 2. Implementation of the Yoga Framework for Action since 2005 indicates that significant progress is taking place and its principles have been firmly established and endorsed. The discussions at the third session demonstrated clearly that we now possess the knowledge, the means, and the commitment to bring this progress further and make disaster risk reduction a national priority. The targets proposed in 2009 at the second global platform are within reach if we take the necessary action. In 2011, there is now a clear political and economic imperative to invest in disaster risk reduction and a sense of urgency to do so. The Secretary General has called for a coalition of action and a high-level meeting during the next General Assembly to address the link between natural hazards and nuclear safety. Japan offered to host the Third World Conference on Disaster Reduction in 2015. Mayors have renewed their commitment to the 10 essentials of the My City is Getting Ready campaign. Private sector participants agreed on 5 essentials for business and issued a statement of commitment for disaster prevention, resilience, and risk reduction. And for the first time ever, young people came together and put forward a 5-point charter on children and disaster reduction. Regional organizations reaffirmed their commitment to implementing regional strategies agreed to in ministerial meetings worldwide. 4. The choice before us as governments, communities, and individuals is to put disaster risk reduction at the forefront of our efforts to protect communities and preserve our way of life for generations to come. The third global platform identified the following critical steps. 4.1. Account for disaster losses in consistent and standardized manner. Economic losses and impacts from disasters are now outpacing wealth creation in many regions. Yet, too few countries conduct multi-hazard risk assessments as a basis for informed development decisions. Disaster risk reduction can only improve when countries have complete data on how risk impacts economic and social losses of disasters and on the risks they face in the future. 4.2. Track investments in disaster risk reduction, including in risk-reducing development, to provide clear evidence of the cost and benefits of investments in risk reduction through verifiable and accountable data to the governments and the public. 4.3. Encourage and increase dedicated budget allocations for disaster risk reduction. Use planning and project evaluation mechanisms to reduce risks in all development investments and create incentives for investing in prevention. Protect public finances with contingency mechanisms, including insurance, informed by risk assessment. 4.4. Provide clear guidance and criteria to improve the effectiveness of national platforms in informing and supporting the executive level of decision-making. Ensure that policy responsibility for disaster risk reduction is backed up by the necessary political authority to increase implementation across sectors. 4.5. Develop standards and indicators for measuring the effectiveness of disaster risk reduction at both the national and regional levels to improve quality and consistency in implementation. 4.6. Increase investment in disaster risk reduction at the local level. Complement the responsibility and accountability of local authorities with commensurate budget allocations, human resources, and technical support for disaster risk reduction, and encourage partnerships with communities and voluntary actions. 4.7. Greater public awareness of disaster risks should be strengthened through ensuring universal access to risk information, building social demand for disaster risk reduction, and promoting individual safety and responsibility. Leverage the rapid development of information and communication technologies to make risk understandable to disaster-prone citizens and communities. 4.8. Encourage the adaptation of innovative social protection mechanisms to reduce disaster impacts on the most vulnerable households, communities, and social groups. 4.9. Anticipate difficult to identify and emerging risks, including those associated with technological hazards and new vulnerabilities through scenario development and contingency planning, encouraging cooperation across sectors and making the best use of available information and technology. 4.10. Promote mechanisms and partnership that integrate climate change adaptation and risk reduction into development planning, avoiding the inefficient use of existing resources. Ensure the availability of climate-related information and provide wider accessibility of technologies for risk reduction as a means for adaptation. 4.11. Use regional summits and ministerial meetings, such as the, I would add, Durban COP17, Seoul COP18, and Rio +20, as vehicles to capitalize on the momentum achieved at the third session of the Global Platform. Support the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals by promoting risk reduction strategies that protect development investments. 4.12. Re-establish the advisory group of the midterm review to guide the follow-up to the midterm review of the Hyogo Framework for Action. Set up a consultative process through UNISDR and ISDR system on the guiding principles, norms, standards, and values to be reflected in a post-2015 instrument. A first outline will be reviewed in the Global Platform 2013 and finalized that following year. Recommend to the Secretary General of United Nations that he constitute a group of eminent disaster risk reduction experts to report at the fourth session of the Global Platform, which together with the 2013 Global Assessment Report on Disaster Reduction would identify the major trends and challenges to be addressed in the post-2015 Hyogo Framework for Action new framework. 4.14. Request that UNISDR be strengthened and resourced in order to effectively support the implementation of all relevant recommendations from this emerging from this platform, acknowledging its leadership within the United Nations on disaster risk reduction. The World Reconstruction Conference. 5. The support offered to countries overwhelmed by the scale or cost of reconstruction after disasters is often poorly coordinated. Uneven and unpredictable financing doesn't always reach those who need to rebuild and begin to recover. Moreover, few countries incorporate disaster prevention systematically into their reconstruction planning, threatening the development prospects of millions. This is why rethinking reconstruction is so important. 6. Previous experience provides important lessons. When recovery is done right, it provides faster, higher quality results at lower costs and capitalizes on the window of opportunity to rebuild in a sustainable and disaster-resilient way. To achieve this, after every disaster demands greater leadership, partnership, and coordinated support from the international community, particularly in the most vulnerable countries. This challenge formed the backdrop of the World Reconstruction Conference. 7. Participants in the World Reconstruction Conference committed to the development of an effective recovery and reconstruction framework. This recovery framework would aim to better define roles and responsibilities within clear institutional arrangements, to effectively capitalize on the strengths of each stakeholder, to clearly place countries in the driver's seat on decision-making and resource allocation, to provide in-time relevant knowledge and lessons learned, and to assist in establishing robust and transparent quality and results monitoring systems. 8. Participants committed to developing improved systems and instruments for recovery and reconstruction finance, welcoming World Bank leadership in this effort. These mechanisms would provide access to reliable reconstruction financing, build capacity to manage the surge of resources, effectively integrate the resources of non-traditional donors, and tap into the financial capacity of the global capital market. 9. Participants endeavored to establish a global reconstruction and recovery knowledge practice, to linking practitioners and networks working on reconstruction and recovery, and providing open access to data and information. 10. The third session of the Global Platform closed with a call for strengthened global leadership for tackling the challenges that the rapidly increasing risk poses to the stability and sustainability of our approach to development. Thank you for your patience. So I hope everyone now has been able to So ladies and gentlemen, I will now invite the line up here who is ready to share their takeaways and their recommendations as they go leaving this meeting. And the first speaker is, as is correct, represents the National Platforms for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Ms. Janet Edwards from the Swedish National Platform and the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agencies will present the message. Thank you.
Thank you, Margareta. Good morning. The meeting of national platforms aim to first look into existing mechanisms that support government action for disaster risk reduction and the effective implementation of the Hugo Framework for Action at the national and local levels. Secondly, to identify the way forward for improved and more efficient governance and institutional processes for disaster risk reduction. Presentations were made by representatives of the national platforms, and this year it was Ecuador, Gambia, Italy, with references to Albania and the cooperation there, the Kyrgyz Republic, Mauritania, Vietnam, and the European Network of National Platforms. They presented effective and innovative approaches in their own country or within a regional context. The speakers explained the challenges faced and lessons learned, as well as priority actions for governance in relation to disaster risk reduction. The facilitator for the session was last year's chair, that would be 2010's chair for the European Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction. The key messages, outcomes, and recommendations are the following. There is a need to measure progress and impacts in disaster risk reduction through identifying targets, indicators, outcomes, and work plans. Strong policy instruments, legislation, protocol, and frameworks are important tools for implementing the Hugo Framework for Action. Disaster risk reduction should be decentralized. The roles, responsibilities, and capabilities of local government should be reinforced. Additionally, local communities, the private sector, academia, and civil society actors should be involved in the HFA implementation and in the work of national platforms. The linkage between climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction should be strengthened. Research on DRR and the implementation of its findings are essential. Private and public sector partnerships in the design and implementation of disaster risk management alternatives can improve work at all levels and therefore should be promoted. The national platforms need commitment from political leaders and decision makers. Platforms need sustainable financial support in order to be able to function and serve their purpose as coordination mechanisms for disaster risk reduction at the country level. As facilitator for this meeting, Mette Lindahl Olsson of the Swedish National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, and MSB, concluded by emphasizing the importance of national platforms in developing a culture of disaster prevention. She stressed that information sharing and knowledge transfer is an effective means of getting stakeholders involved. And finally, Mette encouraged all to continue their cooperative efforts to establish their multi-stakeholder national platforms and working at all levels as well as cross-border. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Janet. And I'll invite Ms. Samura Tialong, who will represent the parliamentarian group in this meeting. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Margareta. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me today to speak and to express the voice of parliamentarians, elected public officials. On behalf of the parliamentarians attending this conference, I would like to express our grateful appreciation to the UNISDR and to the World Bank for the opportunity to participate and to be heard in the fora of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. The dialogue among parliamentarians and mayors was well attended and most insightful. We shared views, experiences, made recommendations on advancing disaster risk reduction, focusing on translating policies into local actions and increasing investment and funding. The dialogue effectively drew out the common concerns and current challenges that confront many countries and communities today. As elected public officials, we share the common view that parliamentarians and mayors have a vital complementary role to play to promote national and global efforts for resilient and sustainable development. Parliamentarians shall work together to create an enabling environment for investing more in building community resilience and to put a human face to risk and vulnerability reduction. Moreover, as parliamentarians, we shall exercise our oversight role over the implementation of risk reduction programs in order to ensure good governance. We are in a position to introduce laws that could enhance and promote risk-sensitive development policies and programs, as well as increase investment in risk reduction. We could also request government agencies to report to the Parliament their respective progress in reducing disaster risk. Given the increasing prevalence of disaster risk and the current state of national capacities for disaster risk reduction, the challenge at hand is enormous. Yet, with political will and genuine commitment to action, we believe much can be done and could be achieved. Strengthening legislation at the national and local levels is important to ensure sustained funding and mainstreaming disaster risk reduction into development processes, as is highlighted by the landmark laws on disaster risk reduction and climate change adopted in the Philippines recently. Disaster risk reduction is a responsibility shared by all. To effectively reduce risk, we must all act as one. It calls for multi-partnerships, concerted actions, integration of efforts, engaging the private sector and academia, and securing funding and investments. As we unite against risk, we parliamentarians agreed
to transcend partisan politics and attain synergy of action in favor of achieving our shared goal of sustainable development. We have agreed then to promote disaster risk reduction as a trans-party agenda, demonstrating our political commitment to sustainable development. In this regard, I am pleased to inform you that the parliamentarians who attended this global platform have been active in advancing disaster risk reduction in their respective regions and countries, and they have expressed their intention to do more. These actions include, for instance, 1, setting up national committees on disaster risk reduction, 2, organizing high-level executive briefings on the importance of disaster risk reduction as part of government's preparation for the UN Rio +20 conference on sustainable development next year. 3, bringing the messages and outcomes of this global dialogue to our respective parliaments. And 4, calling on other stakeholders, especially the executive branch of government, to immediately translate the outcome of this conference into concrete actions at the national and local levels. As political leaders, we have a moral responsibility to act and to protect our peoples from this terrible, chronic threat of disaster. And the urgency for more effective action has never been more pronounced than now. Otherwise, we will never achieve our goal of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you for that message from the parliamentarian group. And now I'd like to invite Mr. David Cadman, who is the Deputy Mayor of Vancouver, who will speak on behalf of the local governments. Please, David.
Thank you, Margarita. Cities are 1% of the Earth's surface, home to half and soon to be 2/3 of the global population, home to 1 billion urban poor, responsible for 75% of the global greenhouse gas emissions with growing and alarming impact on climate change. Billions live in earthquake-prone cities, billions in cities at risk from cyclones and other extreme weather events. By 2050, these numbers may double or triple. Local governments are the first institutional levels to respond to disaster and are best placed to reduce disaster risk and build resilience. They're the places where disasters, the real effects of climate change, are most intimately felt. The vulnerabilities are increasing. It's essential that we work together, national governments, local governments, and community leaders, to build strategies for risk reduction. Making cities resilient must support local sustainability development, improve the quality of life, particularly of the urban poor, especially women, children, and other vulnerable groups. It's important to make disaster risk reduction an integral part of our development planning efforts, and it must include consultative and participatory approach, protection of critical water and waste management systems, livelihood, transportation system, and the protection of individual and public assets, including cultural and historical heritage. The Making Cities Resilient campaign, launched in 2010 at the Mayor's Adaptation Forum in Bonn, now has more than 750 local governments signed up. They are committed to the 10 essentials in making cities resilient, developing and implementing local risk reduction and adaptation strategies in line with the Hyogo framework for action. Mayors and local authorities commit to taking a leadership role in linking local level development and disaster resilience, integrating planning, awareness raising, and investing in disaster risk reduction and resilience building in our cities and towns. Becoming promoters of the global campaign for making cities resilient, My City's Getting Ready, and working at the national, subnational, and local levels, scaling up best practices and implementation of the 10-point essentials for building resilience. Working with our city councils, civil society, the private sector to promote legal frameworks aimed at strengthening capabilities of resilience. Advocating among international and national entities strengthening autonomy, capacity, accountability, and transparency for increasing resilience. We call upon the participants of the global platform to commit to advancing the objectives of the Making Cities Resilient campaign by promoting participation of cities and local governments, supporting the establishment of the role model cities to increase disaster resilience, acknowledging the need for local governments to have a stronger voice at international forums on disaster risk reduction and climate change, maintaining regular dialogue for local leaders and national authorities, promoting an alliance of local governments to promote disaster resilience, encouraging South-South, city-to-city learning opportunities, and sharing information regularly, committing to invest in local action, enabling legal and regulatory frameworks that recognize the role of local government in planning for risk and building in resilience, understanding the need for direct access to financial mechanisms and technical resources, scaling up advocacy for disaster risk reduction, especially financial and legal means of creating disaster and climate resilience at the local level, working to achieve decentralized political, administrative, and legal frameworks that increase capabilities and resources for local government, defining contributions, obligational responsibilities of all sectors, including academia, faith-based groups, city networks, and those with indigenous knowledge, reformulating local development plans to integrate risk reduction, including building and land use plans, promoting and achieving meaningful participation of community, creating and strengthening networks and coordination, and establishing mechanisms for social auditing. In conclusion, we call upon the United Nations Secretariat for the International Strategy for Disaster Reduction to increase its commitment to managing the Making Cities Resilient campaign as a part of its core program, and to work with city networks, the UN organization, and civil society to sustain local preparations for disaster risk reduction and building local resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Can I ask the representative of the regional bodies, Dr. Kim Hak-soo, to take the floor and give the message from the regional organizations? Mr. Kim.
Thank you, Margarita. This is the summary of the heads of IGOs and regional platforms meeting. Building on the HFA midterm review, special emphasis was placed on the important role played by regional and sub-regional IGOs in fostering regional and cross-regional cooperation in disaster risk reduction in order to contribute to the acceleration of HFA implementation at the global, regional, national, and local levels. Regional and sub-regional organizations should be empowered to better support, scale up national level action through better governance and mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction into key development sectors. Following extremely interesting and wide-ranging discussions regarding the role of regional and sub-regional IGOs in regional and cross-regional cooperation, the following 6 recommendations and priorities emerged. First, review and refine the global platform process inclusive of how the outputs of regional and national platforms are embraced. Second, recognize the need for the strengthening of and provision of adequate resources to the UN ISDR Secretariat to lead the process and to effectively support the growing uptake for DRR services at all levels. Third, strongly encouraged that upcoming Rio Plus 20 global meeting and the second 5 years of the HFA be used to promote the integration of DRR and CCA in supporting development. Fourth, strengthen and support IGO's role as mechanisms for effective implementation of recommendations arising from DRR platforms and other high-level meetings. As such, institutionalizing IGO's role in the global platform context is both critical and urgent. Fifth, urged that greater efforts be made to use information management and communications technologies to deepen cross-regional cooperation and knowledge networking, transboundary risk identification and management, and set common standards and indicators in support of measuring progress with mainstreaming DRR. Sixth, strongly recommend to foster cross-regional cooperation through the development of a global network of IGOs under ISDR's coordination. Such a policy networking of IGOs is required to enhance technology transfer, inter-regional DRR exchange facility, sharing of good practices, and successful methodologies for DRR implementation and replication amongst countries. Finally, as a follow-up to the first meeting of IGOs at a global platform, Peru informally offered to host a second meeting of regional IGOs in Peru in the course of 2011. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that very strong message from the IGOs and regional bodies, and thank you to Peru for offering to host the next one. Next representative is Dr. Virginia Murray, who represents the scientific and academic communities and technical institutions. Professor Murray is the head of Extreme Events and Health Protection Center for Radiation, Chemicals and Environmental Hazards in London, UK. Please, Virginia.
Thank you, Margareta. Can I have my presentation, please? There we go. Thank you. I have the honor to present, Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, and colleagues, the summary statement from the Science and Technology Group, which is the International Strategy on Disaster Reduction Scientific and Technical Committee, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to represent them. This work has been based on a whole series of pieces of work. It has included a lot of collaboration with many of our networks and partners, but in particular, one of our colleagues was represented on the Global Assessment Report. Another of our colleagues has been part of the midterm review, and in further addition, we have been involved with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and their special report on extreme events and disasters, which will be published in 2012. We have also been very much part of the program that has been run from Davos on the International Disaster Risk Conference, and we have taken learning from them. And we have been working with the group who have been involved in integrated disaster risk reduction and their programs. And by pulling all this together, we had a preparatory workshop in Pavia earlier in April, where much more learning was gathered. Our summary thoughts are that I think there is insufficient implementation of known disaster risk reduction principles and existing knowledge. That recent disasters have stressed emerging interrelated risks with cascading effects. That there is a need for interactive risk reduction and disaster management processes based on scientific and technical evidence and knowledge. We have three main areas of recommendations which I will go into to try and share with you some of the issues that we think are most important. They will cover the information about the intensifying efforts to follow a scientific-based decision-making process in disaster risk reduction, support a process of comprehensive and rigorous review on the status of science and technology for disaster risk reduction, and look at global support for to make scientific and technical support affordable for economically weak countries. In the first section of the intensity efforts to follow a science-based decision-making process, we call for scientific and technical knowledge in regional platforms, the ISDR national and regional platforms, to be encouraged. And I was very pleased to hear Janet Edwards' statement that fits with that call as well. So thank you, Janet, and all our national platforms partners. Promoting local capacity building for fast transfer of emerging knowledge and technologies into practice and provide feedback to science. And other colleagues have already called for that. Promoting to validate evidence-based best practice to make sure that we can use this as effectively as possible. And promote enhanced collaboration with annual disaster risk reduction science forum to make sure that we have access to these. From the support of a process of comprehensive and rigorous review of the status of science and technology for disaster risk reduction, we wish to advance DRR knowledge based on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Special Report on Extreme Events, consider the emerging applied science and technical issues for the Global Assessment Report for 2013. We wish to also work very closely with our colleagues looking at how we prepare for the review of the science-based information that will be needed from our first report in 2009, Reducing Disaster Risk Through Science Issues and Actions, that was presented, and take that forward to 2013. And we're very keen to establish a process for a comprehensive review of science and technology for disaster risk reduction for taking forward to the post-2015 times. We wish to support the concept of much closer linking to the economically weak countries, and we have two proposals for that. One is to try and encourage the funding mechanisms and the cross-networking skills, but also to call for a proper, more detailed platform at the next global platform to address science and technical issues. Finally, the full report will be on Prevention Web very soon, but we should really like Margareta that this statement on science and technology should be included in the Chair's summary, because we feel that science and technology provides evidence base that will help us all to improve our skills in disaster risk reduction, taking us to improve disaster risk management, but also look at how we might recover better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginia, and rest assured that the entire statement will be included. And now I invite Vishaka Hiddelage, who represents the NGOs and civil society organizations. No, I'm wrong. Sorry, apologies. I think I actually have Josephine Castillo, who represents the Community Practitioners Group. My apologies, Josephine. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Margarita. So, good morning, everybody. I am Josephine Castillo, a leader and a community organizers of Dampa from Philippines. We work in Metro Manila with urban poor communities as well as rural poor nationwide. I am here representing the Community Practitioners Platform for Resilience, and we are building this platform as a space in which community leaders can come together to demonstrate and teach our practices, as well as partner with governments, local authorities, and donors. We are very happy that Margarita Wallström, head of UNISDR, recognized that it is local organized communities, people's organization, and grassroots women's organizations whose work is at the heart of local actions for resilience. And therefore, communities need to be present in forums where the governments, local authorities, and NGOs are talking about the challenges, achievements, and the plans for their implementation of the Yugo Framework for Actions. We want to congratulate and appreciate ISDR for an exciting and successful global platform in which we communities have had opportunities to bring our experience and knowledge to numerous events and met representatives of governments, local authorities, and NGOs. The relationship we have built here will strengthen our ability to build partnership at home. When I go home, through our participation in the global platform, we have been able to show the contributions that grassroots women playing in building resilient communities. In the context of disaster recovery and reconstruction, we showed in our thematic session at the World Reconstruction Conference how the public roles that grassroots women undertake by distributing aid, collecting and disseminating information, by the monitoring construction, accelerate recovery and transform the long-term development of communities. In the context of disaster risk reduction, community leaders presented the many ways in which we are convincing local and national officials that it is in everyone's interest to work together. But it is also clear to us that there are still many challenges that we have to address, problems that we have to solve. Most resilience programs are top-down and highly compartmentalized. They just focus on the area on health, housing, food, or infrastructure. For us, resilience has to be seen in a holistic way, and programs have to allow us, local communities, to decide what is more important for us to address. When talking about multi-stakeholder partnership, it is not enough to say that these are needed for the effective implementation of Hugo Framework for Actions. We have to recognize that there are unequal distributions of power and that for partnership to work for all the stakeholders, there has to be power sharing. If we want to build more resilient communities and address the gaps in local actions, we must bring change from the bottom up. Organized communities have to use their power as constituencies who drive agendas and demand that government respond to their priorities to secure our livelihoods, food, housing, infrastructure, and basic services. As a gentleman on the Gender Roundtable pointed out, change is not going to come from top-down processes. Rather than asking communities to participate in top-down programs designed by government, should participate our initiatives to scale up them up and take them. As the Community Practitioners Platform, we would like to suggest to UNISDR that we jointly launch a 5-year campaign for building resilience communities. This will enable us to work with partners to scale up and strengthen the work we are doing to build our resilience. It will allow us to mobilize community experts in our networks to teach and train other communities and local governments, as many of us in Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean are already doing. We also recommend that at least 10% of all budgets for disaster response, recovery, and risk reductions are allocated for local communities to demonstrate and scale up good practices in collaboration with local and national government, donors, and private sectors. Lastly, we ask that all of us keep in mind that we communities living and working in areas vulnerable to disaster do not want to be seen as victims and recipients of programs planned by others. As my colleague Ana Lucy Bingochilla, a grassroots leader from our network, said recently, we don't just want to be talked about as best practices, but we want to be face-to-face with decision makers so we can partner with them to bring about change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josephine, for that call, very precise call and recommendations from you. And now I invite Vishaka, who represents the NGOs and civil society organizations.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm reading this statement on behalf of Global Network for Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Risk Reduction. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. We are returning to our work with people living at the front line of disasters with anticipation, hope, and also frustration and many concerns. The situation is getting worse, not better. 57% of the local authorities and communities are at most risk report that disaster losses are increasing. Local action is not taking place at anywhere near the levels required to achieve the HFA goal of a substantial reduction in disaster losses by 2015. Progress reported at national level is not being matched by progress at local level. Inadequate resource and capacity is preventing implementation of legislation, policies, and plans at local level. We request the international institutions to set targets that provide direct investment to accelerate the building of local risk governance capacities for local governments as well as community organizations. We anticipate increased commitment and support for risk reduction monitoring and reporting frameworks focused on lives and livelihoods with multi-stakeholder involvement at the local level. We call for shared resilience frameworks that breaks down institutional silos and reflect the way communities understand climate and disaster risk. We request national governments to accept the invitation by views from the frontline teams in 69 countries to listen, to act on the views of the people in their country by bringing together government, both national and local, civil society and communities to assess and tackle risk threatening people at local levels. We request the local governments to take quantifiable action and to receive support from national governments, other institutions, and also local communities to increase knowledge, combining local indigenous expertise with external knowledge, build capacity, skills and structures, and increase measurable impact. We are hopeful that private enterprise will demonstrate commitment to social responsibility and the welfare of community by setting targets for direct investment and action in community level. We will support community organizations to create and maximize opportunities to work in partnerships with government and other organizations to help them build the understanding, ensure greater accountability and transparency, and to develop local capacities and capabilities. Yet, we are frustrated that again, and again, from Yokohama to Kobe to Geneva, a recognition of importance of inclusion and participation of those people most at risk in planning and implementation is emphasized, and yet words are not matched by actions at the local level. In this third global platform, the theme was increase investment in local action. However, in the 14 critical steps identified in the chair summary, draft chair summary, opportunities are missed to emphasize the need to focus on clear outcomes at local level. This must not be allowed to continue. We recognize that civil society has a role to play in supporting governments, communities, to not only develop greater understanding of risks that are faced and work together in reducing those risks, but also to secure and protect their rights as human beings and citizens. The next global platform in 2013 must contain more stories of local progress, local investment, raise capacities, and greater resilience if a substantial reduction in disaster losses is to be achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vishaka, for a very clear list of recommendations, including the point that outcomes at local level should be included in the chair's summary. And now I would like to invite the representative of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. This morning it's Dr. Jean-Pierre Guiteau. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Red Cross movement, I'm extremely thankful and grateful to the conference organizers for such a great event. And I'm going to read the following statement on behalf of the movement. We, Red Cross, Red Crescent National Societies, we welcome the draft chair's summary and compliment UNSDR for having captured the rich discussion that have taken place during the course of this week. In regard to the chair's summary content, it's a very comprehensive, informative, and specific document. We congratulate you for it, and we endorse it all. But we would like to emphasize the following 4 points in support of the outcomes of this global platform. 1, the adaptive capacity of the people, the most vulnerable one to disaster risk and climate change, need increased investment now. 2, new financing and investment instrument to scale up ex ante local action are needed for the most vulnerable communities. 3, disaster risk reduction should continue to include both humanitarian and development actions which meet minimum community safety and resilience standards. 4, domestic legislation for disaster risk reduction must be strengthened in order to create an enabling environment for increasing local level actions. Finally, I would like to thank UNISDR for an excellent third session of the Global Platform, and on behalf of the Red Cross, Red Crescent Societies, commit to increasing support to high-risk communities and providing leadership in local action together with local government and other key partners. Statement of intent alone will not give us lasting credibility with people who need our support. We are fully committed to play our part in risk reduction, and we must also hold each other accountable for acting upon the commitment we have made this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that excellent and clear statement of commitment from the Red Cross, Red Crescent. And now to our private sector group, who have been mentioned by each one of us, I think. So I welcome Mr. Aris Papadopoulos, who represents the private sector group here. Aris, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I feel both privileged and humble to report to this distinguished audience on behalf of over a dozen members of the Private Sector Advisory Group, who just a few days ago honored me to serve as their chair. The history of the Private Sector Advisory Group is very brief, starting with the Secretary General's vision just last year to better harness the knowledge, resources, and energy of the private sector to accelerate progress on disaster risk reduction. 6 to 9 months ago, Special Representative Margarita Wallström brought together an advisory group from members of the private sector. And many of us mentioned to her, who had been active in sustainability, that this was the UN's best kept secret, and hope to change that. This week, for the first time, we all attended the Global Platform. At the platform, we made good progress, held a press conference for the just released commitment statement that I'll mention later, presented the same at the plenary statements, held a private sector roundtable along with public sector members, and had our group come closer together and organize its plans and goals going forward. Why is the private sector here? And I believe many of you have perhaps asked that. Besides social responsibility and creating goodwill, there is a very strong business case why the private sector has a vital interest in disaster risk reduction and resilience. Without stability, resilience, and some predictable continuity, economic growth and prosperity vital to private sector activities is definitely undermined. The public sector that suffers from these disasters are our employees, our customers, and our suppliers. Who is not in one of those categories? We came here not just to speak, but also to listen and learn. Some of the important takeaways that myself personally are taking back is hazards have no borders, color, or economic level. Hazards are natural, catastrophes are human. They are the results of our own human decisions. Sensitive groups include women, children, and the poor that suffer the most. That we have to move from re to pre, more prevention and preparedness, and less recovery and reconstruction, and develop sustainable solutions, not just bandages. That we have to build trust and break down barriers. That is a key from going from re to pre, not just between the private sector and the public sector, but even amongst elements of the private sector. That frameworks can be global, but actions need to be local. And that awareness is critical. The UN has done such a remarkable job in developing awareness in climate change that the same needs to be done on resilience, and the best kept secret no more. That sustainability is not just the important area of reducing environmental impact, but also becoming resilient. On action, we have produced and hope that you have been able to have a chance, if not, we'll be able to see through the website of UNISDR, the commitment statement that has been drafted and released that not only the members of the advisory group are committing to, but also invite all participants in the private sector, large companies, small companies, trade associations, and even government-owned enterprises to be part of. This statement contains 5 action items, the headlines of which are, number 1, promote and develop private-public partnerships. Number 2, leverage sectoral private expertise and strengths. Number 3, foster a collaborative exchange and dissemination of data. Number 4, support national and local risk assessments. And number 5, support the development and strengthening of national and local laws, regulations, policies, and programs. We aim to act as catalysts in bringing together those committed entities from the public-private sector into a global partnership that will act locally. Our goal is to get at least 1,000 signatories to this commitment statement within the next 12 months, and I believe that we will do far more than that. We've organized ourselves along 4 task groups. First, communication and awareness. Second, metrics. We've seen we have a lot of statistics, but it still is not clear to us what it really means to be resilient, either at the city level, at the regional level, or even at the individual level. The third area, task group, is partnerships, and the fourth is resources and support as we aim to become self-sufficient in carrying out this objective. In closing, one of the thoughts that has emerged from our discussions and thinking is the idea of micro-resilience. Our ancestors, without the technology, without the communications, and without the omnipresence of government, practiced micro-resilience. Our ancestors respected the forces of nature and recognized the vulnerability of humans. They knew where to live, they knew how to build. If we can create millions of lights of micro-resilience, we might succeed in our combined purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aris, and I think you've just created a new slogan for us, moving from re to pre. So that's an immediate impact of your presence here today. Next speaker is Ms. Lily Caravantes, who is speaking on women and men, representing women and men. Lily is the Presidential Secretary for Food Safety and Nutrition, and she's from Guatemala. Lily, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Buenos días. Excelencias, señoras y señores. La voz de hombres y mujeres sobre la incorporación de la perspectiva de género en la reducción de riesgo de desastres. Me dirijo a ustedes en nombre de mujeres y hombres que participaron en el debate de la mesa redonda sobre la incorporación de la categoría de género en la reducción de riesgos de desastres. En la primera sesión oficial de la Plataforma Mundial sobre la Reducción de Riesgo de Desastres, que incorpora las cuestiones de género, se registró una gran participación y se esclarecieron los retos de considerar que los riesgos a desastres no son naturales, como no son naturales las profundas desigualdades construidas entre hombres y mujeres. Participaron cerca de 180 profesionales, incluidos 50 hombres. Con conferencias de alto nivel y una audiencia activa, el foro nos permitió debatir la importancia de la reducción de riesgos de desastres que incorpora la perspectiva de género, así como los retos y oportunidades para su implementación en todos los niveles y lo que significa la reducción económica de lo que esto impacta en la vida de los países. El foro destacó la idea que las mujeres son líderes e impulsoras eficaces del cambio y de las soluciones, y no simplemente se haga referencia a ellas como pertenecientes a grupos vulnerables o como víctimas pasivas de los desastres. La integración de la perspectiva de género en la reducción de riesgo de desastres es un componente esencial y un requisito importante del desarrollo sostenible. Gracias a ella, construimos la resiliencia de los países y comunidades frente a los desastres. Aún así, la estrategia sigue siendo un reto para incorporar la experiencia vital de las mujeres con voz y voto en los espacios de toma de decisiones, y para lograrlo es necesario acelerar el paso que hoy llevamos. No podemos permitir que la situación continúe así. Por lo tanto, debemos aumentar, acelerar y mantener nuestros esfuerzos a través de la sensibilización de mujeres y hombres y la mejora de la capacidad de los gobiernos y las comunidades para integrar la perspectiva de género y la reducción de desastres en la planificación local y nacional del desarrollo. Para obtener los resultados deseados sobre el tema, debemos trabajar juntos y el doble del tiempo. La integración de la reducción de riesgos de desastres y la perspectiva de género es un reto colectivo que implica crear alianzas y múltiples asociaciones y trascender las afiliaciones políticas. Por tanto, la Plataforma Mundial y la Plataforma Comunitaria de Practicantes de Resiliencia requieren una alianza estrecha y debieran de ser parte importante de la Plataforma Mundial la incorporación de la perspectiva de género. En esta se debe de hacer visible que los gobiernos tienen que tomar una decisión política de lograr que las necesidades del ámbito público y del ámbito privado tengan visibilidad y que se orienten los recursos del gobierno central hacia la focalización de la población de mujeres en todo el ciclo de vida, las niñas, las adolescentes, las mujeres madres, las ancianas. Además, el tratamiento de las desigualdades entre hombres y mujeres debe de considerar el acceso urgente de la información, la tecnología, los conocimientos y las herramientas para que las mujeres tomen mejores decisiones, así como las estrategias de adaptación al cambio climático que vincule las acciones desde la casa hasta la política pública. Finalmente, la responsabilidad del gobierno en la integración de la perspectiva de género también se debería abordar con el papel activo de los parlamentarios y las sociedades civiles, solicitando a los gobiernos que informen sobre el progreso del marco de acción de Hyogo, de acuerdo con las directrices y los indicadores de UNSDR, pero también logrando el apoyo de la comunidad internacional para establecer los vínculos entre el apoyo a las mujeres de base y los gobiernos. Transformar las actuales condiciones es una responsabilidad de todas y todos. Muchas gracias.
It's appropriate that he gets to have the floor last of all the report back. And the floor goes to André, who speaks on behalf of all the children that have been here, but I think all the children everywhere. So André, please step.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I am here to give my message in behalf of my co-children participants from Kenya and the Philippines, and from all children in the world. We attended this global platform in order to fight for the rights of young people to participate in issues affecting our lives and rights, especially about climate change and disasters. In our country, we are vulnerable to various calamities such as earthquakes, typhoons, storm surges, and many others. During typhoons, lives and properties are destroyed, classes are stopped, and our right for education and peaceful living is violated. That's why children like me got involved with disaster risk reduction activities. We planted trees to prevent landslides and mangroves to weaken storm surges. We also separate our rubbish to avoid block drainage and floods in our community. We also held community gatherings and film showings in order to raise the awareness of our community against disasters. These activities are made possible through the efforts of our local government unit and Plan International, a non-government organization working in our area. At the global platform, we learned a lot on how to improve our knowledge on disaster risk reduction. We have learned many things people around the world do in order to fight disasters while sharing some ideas of our own. We learned to value life in our planet. We also learned how to help more in saving our communities from calamities in our own practical ways. As children, we would like the adults to prioritize children on disaster risk reduction. Being the most vulnerable sector of society when it comes to disaster, actions and plans should be made together with the children in order to ensure our safety. Child protection is a must before, during, and after a disaster. Education is the most important way of sending information about disaster risk reduction. So schools must be safe and education must not be interrupted. As a result, please focus your disaster risk reduction efforts on practical measures to achieve these goals. The future of children depends on your actions today. Thank you for listening, and again, good morning.
Thank you very much, André. I'm very happy that you got the last word in this morning's session. And now I'd like to open the floor for your comments and observations and ideas on the chair's summary. As you will have reflected on, I'm sure you can feel that it does indeed include many of the messages that are coming here. Also in this morning. Let me just, before we proceed, all the statements and the proposals that these representatives have delivered will be available on our website and included in the proceedings of this session, so nothing will be lost. But in my experience from the platform in 2009, they were not very well used. So my personal message is, please don't just put this on the shelf, pull them out, read them again, use them for your continued work. Sorry for that. That's actually my concluding word today. This is the chair. What's the nature of the chair summary? Well, it is a chair summary. So this is not a forum where we have to negotiate. We are trying to capture consensus, and we are trying to produce a document that is helpful to all of you and all of us in our continued work. And the process from now on will take your comments during the next hour or so. We will then leave the document open on the website for further comments. We will revise the draft as required, and then we will close it. and produce the final report. And all this will be available on the various websites and regional offices, Prevention Web, ISDR websites, and your own websites. I hope that you will put the proceedings of the platform and the declarations on your websites as well. So with that, I'd like to invite, I think I saw Norway had the flag up. Did I? Yes. And then we have Turkey. Norway, would you like to take the floor first?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for putting together this chair's summary. That is a very excellent effort and very much appreciated. Since the comments that we just heard ended with the children's representative, I'll start my comments on that. And I think maybe as a suggestion, you could consider expanding paragraph 3 and the mention of children, because I think that's the most important part of paragraph 3. You could even consider making a separate paragraph on the children, because no one should be in doubt that that is one of the most key elements that we're taking away from all these messages that we have heard. My second point is that in paragraph 411, when we go through and mention some of these other stopping points that are ahead of us, you should, I think, also include COP17 in Durban coming up, not just COP18 and Rio +20. 3 more quick comments. I think maybe it would be appropriate if we could reflect in the summary the factors that are driving risks, the need for building up institutions and legal frameworks, because I think that has been a central theme also. And last but not least, I think the key role of women as drivers of this process should be given more emphasis in this very excellent summary that you have produced. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. From Norway, I think Russia had asked for the floor. Turkey, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of Turkish delegation, first of all, I want to express our best congratulations for all the people who made this hard work for us and also for our global world. And we already accept this document as a guideline for us, for Turkey. Besides that, we want to add some things briefly. The first one is about scientific works. The scientific studies are an important part of disaster risk reduction, and the results of it must be put into the legislative documents also. The second point is that we need more interactive actions between national platforms and regional platforms also. European platforms is a good example of this kind of activities. The third one is that the linkage between Hyogo Framework Action and Millennium Development Goal is so important. And the lasting time in 2015 is very near to us. So after 2015, maybe we need one umbrella to merge these 2 documents into one strategy. The fourth one is that comes from the lessons learned from Great Eastern Japanese earthquakes. We think that the information sharing between government and government agencies and private sector, and also between government and society, is so important. So there must be an open database for information for all of us. The fifth one is, since disaster risk reduction is one of the important development concerns, more emphasis should be made on mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in national development plans as well as regional development planning, and instruments should be identified clearly all level of development, and the linkages between disaster risk reduction and urban development process should be strengthened. And the last one is about the second part of documents. Besides World Bank, some international financial institutions like European Development Bank and Islamic Development Bank or Asian Development Banks, has hard works and successful works about risk reduction activities and recovery and rehabilitation activities that we must mention about them in the second part of this document. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much for very excellent proposals. I realize, even though we are writing as fast as we can, to be absolutely sure that we capture your ideas, can you please give us your piece of paper? Because I'm sure you wrote it down. Thank you for that. I then had the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Like others also, we would like to thank the organizing committee for this very important third global platform, as well as those that has prepared this chairman summary. Of course, my delegation welcomes the draft chair summary that certainly has captured salient points of our deliberation during our 4 days of meeting. The summary will guide our way forward toward considerable progress of the implementation of the Yogo Framework for Action and identifies major trends and challenges in the post-2015. I understood that this is a chair summary, but nevertheless, in order to be factual, and since I believe this is the first time that the Global Champion Award was given at this very August meeting, my delegation wishes to propose that the following sentences after the first sentence of the third paragraph to be added, the wording as follows. The platform recognized the outstanding and exemplary work of Dr. Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, as the recipient of the Global Champion for Disaster Risk Reduction Award. Secondly, on para 4.9, it seems that the para does not work well. We're not an expert in the English language, but I do believe that there are some words missing there. So we would like to propose, in order to put it more clearly, the wording anticipate the difficulties to identify emerging risks. So I think there is the word that are missing there in the beginning of the paragraph. Lastly, noting the important and salient point on para 4.11 on the need to take into account many regional summit and ministerial meeting. I would like to once again take this opportunity to extend invitation to all distinguished delegates to participate in the 5th ASEAN Ministerial Conference on DRR to be held in Yogyakarta, Indonesia in October 2012. To be clear on all of this, we certainly will submit this statement so that you can be clear on the correct wording that we would like to be inserted in the chair summary. Once again, to congratulate you personally for a very successful undertaking with regard to the global platform. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Yes. And can I now invite the representative of the Russian Federation, please? You have the floor.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель. Мы бы хотели поблагодарить за прекрасно подготовленный summary, который мы в целом поддерживаем. Нам кажется, он хорошо структурирован, и в нем отражены все аспекты проходивших дискуссий. Вместе с тем, нам кажется, что, может быть, имело смысл лучше определить и разделить работу между консультативной группой и группой высокопоставленных экспертов, потому что речь идет о будущей архитектуре стратегии, и, в принципе, все мы заинтересованы в том, чтобы было более понятно, о чем идет речь. Нам кажется, что консультативная группа могла бы сосредоточиться на разработке постхиотской архитектуры, значит, работая в консультациях со странами, в том числе через группу поддержки ISDR. Она должна была бы представить выводы генеральному секретарю. Генсекретарь, соответственно, должен был бы включить эти выводы в доклад, который представлялся бы на рассмотрение Генассамблеи. И, соответственно, Генеральная Ассамблея должна была принять финальное решение о будущей архитектуре. Таким образом, с нашей точки зрения, роль Генеральной Ассамблеи должна была бы быть отражена в summary. Что касается группы высокопоставленных экспертов, нам кажется, что они должны были бы сосредоточиться на анализе крупномасштабных катастроф и рекомендовать, соответственно, консультативной группе представить свои рекомендации по постхёкской архитектуре. И эти рекомендации должны были бы быть основаны на научных знаниях. И, соответственно, у нас есть третий пункт. Это о роли научно-технического комитета. Мы согласны с представителем этого комитета, который предложил отразить в summary их выводы. Мы поддерживаем это предложение и считаем, что научно-технические знания в области уменьшения опасности бедствий очень важны. Спасибо.
Thank you very much for those helpful comments in clarifying these two structures. Let me just summarize for you who we have as speakers here in case you have not been listed. We have Bangladesh, Venezuela, Lebanon, Togo, Solomon Islands, UK, Finland, and then we have UN Habitat, UNICEF, WMO, Mauritius.
Did you put Netherlands?
Netherlands, not yet, but I'm putting them now. So these ones we've taken note of, and I will just continue. Then we have Mexico and Brazil. Okay. So then I'll give the floor to the representative of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to all the distinguished delegates. First, Madam Chair, on behalf of the delegation of Bangladesh, I would like to congratulate you for an excellent first draft. And it's always a major challenge to try and capture all of the various elements that have come up over the last 4 days, especially given the diversity and scope of this platform and the very rich deliberations that we have all had the privilege and pleasure of listening to. Just for the sake of completeness and to make it as inclusive as possible, I would just like to raise and register one point. There has been a very eloquent presentation in the form of the Voice of Parliamentarians. And we find that in this platform, for the first time perhaps, the role of parliaments and parliamentarians has been recognized and acknowledged as being an important part of the overall discourse. And if we go back to the presentation that was made earlier today, we will find that there are very specific areas which have been identified in terms of the very important role that parliamentarians can play. This is with regard to governance, with regard to oversight and scrutiny, with regard to legislation, and providing an enabling environment in which the decisions of the executive will have much more impact and effect. And of course, the fact that this is a complementary role, parliamentarians are not in competition with the executive, but rather they add to the wholeness of the process as a whole. So may I recommend, Madam Chair, that going back to your summary, in particular items 4.3, 4.4, and 4.5, these are all areas which are in fact alluding to the role of parliaments as well. So either incorporate the role of the parliamentarians in the terms that I've just described in any of those three sections, or even have a separate short clause, because your summary will, I understand, guide our actions and prioritize our actions over the next 2 years. So I think it's important to mainstream it in the documentation so that the due role of the parliamentarians can be acknowledged and factored in. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And now I invite UN Habitat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me open by congratulating you personally and the Secretariat, as well as the Bank, on the conclusion of an incredibly stimulating and interesting week of events here. But I have 2 points I'd like to suggest in respect to the chair's summary. One in respect to paragraph 4.11. Amongst the many other milestone events that are going to take place along the road to 2013 and 2015, I'd like to suggest that in an increasingly urban world, the ISDR, and the bank for that matter, should consider increasing its profile and the use of the 6th and 7th World Urban Forums that will take place in 2012 and 2014 as one venue within which many of the delegations here to the global platform will be represented, along with what has consistently been a crowd of participants exceeding 10,000 people. Many of them, all of them in fact, gathered to assist in driving sustainable urban development, and certainly the feature of risk reduction and building resilience is a key element of that forum. So I'd like you to consider that along the roadmap. On paragraph 5, on the summary of the World Reconstruction Conference, and with all due respect to the topic and the need for exploring better, more efficient means of delivering reconstruction support, it might be useful for the chair to note in a prefatory statement to the summary that the cost of reconstruction in social, political, and economic terms, as we heard from the private sector group here, is directly and inversely proportional to the investment in risk reduction and resilience building. My recommendation is that this might make the necessary link between the two parallel conferences that are here. Thank you very much, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much. I think two very excellent recommendations. And now I'll go to my list here. I think next is Venezuela. You have the floor, please.
Muy buenos días. En nombre de la Universidad Nacional Experimental de las Fuerzas Armadas, UNEFA, agradecen primero que todo a Dios y a la plataforma global y a todos los organismos que conforman este evento la participación de nuestra delegación, ya que al unir todos los esfuerzos podemos lograr un mundo mejor, que otorgue el derecho, capacidades, recursos al mundo y así poder lograr ciudades resilientes donde se defina la responsabilidad en todos los sectores que lo integran y así garantizar recursos, capacidades, conocimientos y herramientas, logrando la sostenibilidad, la conciencia, la sensibilidad a la humanidad. Que se tome el compromiso y apliquen medidas políticas para aumentar la prevención ante desastres y crisis en todas las áreas de desarrollo, sean estos sociales, económicos, productivos, ambientales y políticos, manteniendo en cuenta las 3 E, efectividad, eficiencia y eficacia para lograr así en un mundo mejor la resiliencia. Gracias.
Thank you very much for that contribution also. And can I invite the representative of Togo?
Merci Madame la Présidente pour tout le dynamisme avec lequel cette séance est en train d'être conduite, bien sûr avec l'appui de Madame Zoubida. Je voudrais également remercier l'équipe qui notamment est restée pour faire ce travail. Je n'ai pas grand-chose à ajouter, mais c'est par rapport à votre remarque de tout à l'heure que d'habitude les documents positionnés sur les sites ne sont pas pour autant actifs, c'est-à-dire que par moment ces documents ne sont pas parlants. Alors moi j'aurais bien souhaité, par ma petite expérience, que tous les points ici, si ils pouvaient être encore résumés en filigrane, ne serait-ce que pour intéresser les partenaires à différents niveaux, les gouvernants. Mon expérience, lorsque je présente un compte rendu à mon ministre en demi-page, il est plus intéressé très rapidement, mon document est lu quand les autres sont là. Alors, c'est vraiment dans ce sens que moi je voudrais que le document, au lieu de 4 pages, qu'on puisse passer peut-être à 2 pages, ce qui va beaucoup intéresser. Et dans la structuration, il est vrai qu'au début, nous avions dit, nous sommes ici pour faire un état des lieux, les progrès réalisés, les échecs, mais aussi fixer en même temps les défis, les perspectives. Et donc, si le document pouvait être structuré en ce sens, avec pour précision, qu'est-ce qui revient aux partenaires à faire, qu'est-ce qui revient aux plateformes, qu'est-ce qui revient aux gouvernants et jusqu'au niveau local. Mais, je le répète, en 2 pages. Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je suis prêt vraiment à approcher l'équipe qui a travaillé pour apporter plus de précisions sur le format que je proposais qu'on adopte. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much. Particularly, I think you must be the only one here today who is not proposing to expand the document, but to cut it down. So we will welcome the collaboration with you. Can I then invite the representative of Mauritius? You have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It's Marcus with the Global
You're
Network.
Not Mauritius.
I'm a guest of Mauritius for this morning.
I see.
Anyway, first of all, thank you, Margareta, for the conference, for the work that the team's done. I can only begin to imagine how what has to go on to make these events the success that they are. So well done. Congratulations on that. You know, just looking through the document, just some initial thoughts now as I'm looking through that. And I guess if I'm honest with you, I think I'm a little bit disappointed in my own heart that at a conference which essentially, you know, the theme is about increased investment at the local level, I felt the document could have been more explicit on what the actual investments are that we need and what we need to get that return on the investment, and be quite explicit about what the outcomes we need at the local level. And I'm looking through this document and I'm kind of ticking off you know, the different 14 actions, and I see that 3 of them speak explicitly to the local level. 5 of the 14 speak to the national level, and 6 of the 14 speak to the regional and international levels. Now I fully realise that, you know, bringing about change at the local level requires action from the different scales. But I think, you know, even when I look back at the Chair's summary statement in 2009, there was points about, you know, the role of women and children as agents of change, about bringing them into decision-making processes. There was comments about the importance of participatory processes, grassroots, local level processes. There was importance of local, state, non-state partnerships, quite explicit things that really are, you know, felt to be critical to this local level action. And I feel that you know, the document is not quite capturing really what needs to be done to bring about those changes. So I'm not quite sure what we can do about that, but it's just it's a reflection on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. I think we've received some concrete proposals here from other speakers, and anything that you would like to contribute will certainly be considered fully. So that was Marcus representing Mauritius this morning. Can I then invite the speaker from Solomon Islands, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I take immense pleasure in representing my government to attend this forum, and hence have come here with a lot of expectations, and more so representing the Ministry of Women. I have come here also expecting that the silent W, which is women, will be emphasized in the summary recommendations. To my disappointment, there does not seem to be any emphasis on that. And yet yesterday, we held for the first time a roundtable on reducing disaster risk reduction, approaching it from a gender-sensitive perspective. And so I feel paragraph 4.8 plays down women's resilience and that of other vulnerable groups and their potential as active agents of change. Paragraph 4.8 continues to reinforce a strongly held belief that women and other vulnerable groups are passive agents of change, are passive victims. This may be true, but we must also recognize and accept that women and other vulnerable groups have the potential, knowledge, and skills to contribute meaningfully to decision-making processes and ultimately to improve adaptation measures. My recommendation, therefore, would be to include a specific recommendation on the need to making disaster risk reduction gender sensitive and ensuring gender equality concerns are mainstreamed across all disaster risk reduction policy and planning processes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Consider that done. Let me then invite United Kingdom.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And first, let me welcome the broad and cross-cutting nature of this Chair's summary. We also are impressed by your ability to bring the private sector significantly into the deliberations we've had here. If I may make two suggestions to the text, while I'm sure that there are ways of making the overall text shorter by making it more concise, I hope these two suggestions can be included. The first, in paragraph 4.9, would be to insert the words scientifically informed risk assessment between through and scenario development. And the second suggestion I make is in paragraph 4.11, where after use regional summits, you might wish to insert interregional meetings. I suggest that simply because there are ways in which the various regional organisations around the world might helpfully learn from each other in this field. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much for those helpful contributions. They will be implemented. And then I invite the representative of Netherlands, please.
Bonjour, Madame. I rather to paragraph 4.8, and I have just a small question, please. How can you assure the public societies and the private sector?
Sir, can I just speak who took the floor so we can identify you?
Sorry?
Who is speaking?
Lebanon.
Lebanon, I see, okay. I actually said the Netherlands, but I'm sure Netherlands will wait until you're ready. So the representative of Lebanon, please.
Yeah, I rather to paragraph 4.8. And my question is, how can you assure the public societies and the private sector that a plan of social protection can reduce the impact of disaster, knowing that the problems of hunger and shelters in the world couldn't be solved up till now by big organizations? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will reflect your idea there in that context. And then I give the floor to Netherlands, please. Joris.
Thank you, Margaretha. I will give it a second try. Thank you very much for your comprehensive draft share summary, which covers very well the different useful and important discussions we had over the last weeks. One of the main issues discussed and challenged in the different reports was the gap with the implementation at local level. sharing the comments made earlier by Marcus Oxley, I feel that the chair summary could emphasize somewhat more the local dimension. The focus is now, among others in paragraph 4.6, on the enabling local governance with budget and capacity, but we should also build the bridge on two sides. We should not conceive and implement national and international policy in a top-down fashion. We should take into account local perspectives and make use of the practical experiences from local level. Taking into account as well here the role of civil society and the importance of good governance and transparency. Secondly, on the paragraphs of the World Reconstruction Forum, we could suggest to make the use of the momentum of disasters to build back better and to integrate DRR into development more explicit. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Joris. And now I'd like to invite the representative of UNEP. You still want to speak? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Partnership for Environment and Disaster Risk Reduction and the Partners for Resilience, two consortia comprised of a total of 17 organizations and agencies, UNEP supports the recommendations outlined in the draft chair summary. However, we would like to point out the absence in the summary of the role of ecosystems and environmental services in contributing to disaster risk reduction and local resilience. Both the Global Assessment Report 2009 and 2011 have already recognized that environmental degradation is a significant underlying risk factor, and that well-managed ecosystems mitigate hazard impacts and increase community resilience against disasters and climate change. These issues resonated throughout the sessions this week, underlining the importance of the environment in managing urban risks, as well as in enhancing recovery and reconstruction. Therefore, we call for the following 3 points: greater investments in capacity building, technical assistance, decision support tools, and financing for countries to enable national and local governments, as well as communities, to apply integrated solutions that achieve environmentally sustainable and disaster-resilient development. We also call for policies, legislation, and institutional arrangements that support the scaling up of integrated approaches for sustainable development planning based on ecosystems management, disaster risk reduction, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Finally, we recommend that commitments made in the chair summary of 2009 be fulfilled and reflected in the 2011 summary. Madam Chair, we will submit written text for inclusion in the final draft of the chair summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And may I also invite the representative of UNFCCC to take the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for producing this comprehensive chaired summary. Adding on the proposal made by the distinguished delegates from Norway on paragraph 4.11 to include the mentioning of the COP17 in Durban, I would also like to call your attention on the importance of including the support for the Cancun adaptation framework as part of the conclusions coming from this global platform, recognizing that this summary will be used as a guidance for the DR practitioners at large. The Cancun Adaptation Framework provides one of the most effective entry points for the DR community to channel the knowledge and expertise accumulated through the Hyogo Framework for Action, and to increase the synergy between the international adaptation policy process and existing work in the DR domain. So my proposal would be to have explicit mentioning of the Cancun Adaptation Framework in the conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The representative of Finland, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and really our delegation's thanks to you and the other organizers for thought-provoking and high-quality discussions and excellent arrangement as well. We welcome the chair's conclusions and have only one small amendment to offer on paragraph 411. We believe that it would be important to make a reference of the importance of including a DRR also on the aid effectiveness agenda, and maybe that could work as sentence number 2 in that paragraph. Thank you very much.
Excellent proposal. Thank you very much. And can I now invite Mexico, please?
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. En primer lugar, quisiéramos reconocer el liderazgo con el que han conducido esta plataforma global y, por supuesto, hacer extensivo el reconocimiento al Banco Mundial por tomar la iniciativa conjunta de celebrar la conferencia sobre reconstrucción. Mi delegación quisiera hacer dos recomendaciones en el espíritu que guía este documento de resumen de la presidencia. En primer lugar, y siguiendo las propuestas que han hecho otros distinguidos delegados, quisiéramos que se considerara que el párrafo 2 refleje que la reducción del riesgo de desastres es una prioridad no solamente nacional, pero una prioridad que va en todos los niveles, y quizá que se refleje que va de lo local al nivel internacional, o que se ponga una referencia a todos los niveles. Esa sería una primera recomendación. La segunda recomendación que nos permitimos sugerir es en el punto 4.5, para que se incluya que el desarrollo de estos estándares y estos indicadores tengan que ver en particular con las inversiones. Nos parece que es un tema en el que estamos comprometidos y es un tema al que le tenemos que poner especial énfasis. Así que sugeriríamos que después de la frase Disaster Risk Reduction se cite in particular investments, si eso fuera posible. Y esos son los comentarios de la Delegación de México. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for these constructive contributions. And now I'll ask the representative of Brazil. Milton, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 3 suggestions. First, as you said, that we should look over the horizon, and as André said, schools are very important. Education is fundamental, and I think that it should be reflected in some way in the document. The second suggestion, I think it would be useful for all of us to have reflected that for $1 that we spend in disaster risk reduction, we do not spend $4 or $7 after in recuperating our societies. So I think that kind of relation is very useful. It's been used, as you well know, for health, for preventive measures in health, and for curative measures. I think it would be very useful for all of us. The third one is, as my colleague from Trinidad and Tobago very well explained, I think we have to have the partnership with our congressmen. I have the honor to have here 3 congressmen with me, which are part of our Special Commission on Disaster Risk Reduction at the Brazilian Parliament, and I think it would be very important to have a locus for them to discuss inside the strategy. As you suggested that perhaps we would have a working group for private sector, I would suggest perhaps to have a working group for parliamentarians also. And at the very end, just to say that I agree fully with the colleagues from the United Kingdom and Togo that as concise the document is, the more it will be read. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these contributions. And now I invite the representative of Argentina. You have the floor, please.
Gracias, Margareta. Primero que nada, agradecer vivamente la excelente tarea que se ha desarrollado durante esta semana y que indudablemente parte de su propia responsabilidad para hacernos pasar esta semana reflexionando sobre un tema tan urgente y tan importante con excelentes resultados. Desde ese punto de vista quisiera simplemente reforzar dos temas que me parecen importantes que formaran parte del sumario, aunque sea de forma muy pequeña, muy liviana, pero muy contundente, que ya se ha marcado, que son los puntos 4.2, 4.3, 4.3, 4.4 y 4.5, con el tema de parlamentarios. Los parlamentarios tenemos una tarea muy importante que hacer y convocados a esta conferencia, indudablemente nos vamos enriquecidos con todas las posibilidades de poder insertar en nuestras políticas públicas y sobre todo en las políticas de Estado, a través de normas que se adecuen al respecto, este tema de la reducción de riesgo a desastre, que es lo que realmente nos va a llevar a un futuro sustentable y resiliente. Por lo tanto, hago votos para que en el sumario esté integrado el tema de la participación de los parlamentarios con los contenidos que allí están. Y en segundo lugar, también como mujer he participado en el tema de la mesa de mujeres y creo que han hecho una muy buena performance convocando a las mujeres a este tema, porque tenemos mucho que decir, mucho que hacer y seguramente tenemos mucho también que recibir. En primer lugar, se habla de capacitación de las mujeres, pero por otro lado también sugiero que se hable del proceso educativo en el cual las mujeres están altamente comprometidas en la mayor parte de los países. Para poder hacer nuestro la resiliencia y la reducción de riesgo a desastres, necesitamos que desde temprana edad nos eduquen en este contexto. Y las mujeres tienen un aporte importantísimo que hacer, porque en muchos países las mujeres prácticamente son las docentes y son los profesores que asumen casi un 80% de la responsabilidad en estos campos. Muchas gracias por todo y espero que la próxima vez estemos más enriquecidos todavía con estos temas.
Good. Thank you very much for that and for your wishes for the next meeting. Can I then invite David Cadman? You are now speaking as Mayor of Vancouver, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Firstly, what I want to do is to say that I very much hope that paragraph 4.6, as it pertains to cities and local government, can be strengthened, and we will get you the specific language that we submitted there. And in particular, I guess I want to speak in support of what Marcus Hawksley said, representing Mauritius, that the need to include a much more fulsome representation of all of local government and its community is very important here, and echo what Netherlands said about equally putting the component on local government in there, and more particularly what the UN Environment Program said about the role of natural services as being absolutely key to be maintained and enhanced at the local level. And lastly, to support the statement by Mexico with regard to building a local to national structure here. All of these things are very important, as this is the century of cities. By the end of this century, 90% of the world's population will be living in cities, and most of them in the developing world will be living in places where we frankly don't want them living. They'll be living in the marginal territories where they'll be most exposed to risk. And so if we don't get the local authorities involved with all of their connections at a local level, bringing in the wider community, I don't think we're going to achieve the kind of risk reduction that we want to achieve and the kind of resilience that we're going to have to achieve. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that very clear statement, David. Can I now invite the representative of UNICEF, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like others, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate you and your team on the success of this event. It's been said that we didn't inherit the world from our ancestors, but we hold it in care for our children. In this regard, I think Children are the future, and with regard to disaster risk reduction, they regularly represent more than 50% of those that are affected. They have the right to participate in issues that affect their future. They have a right to continued education, and they are a huge resource for the future. We would like to suggest, without necessarily lengthening the document, we would like to suggest that on point number 2, with regard to the targets that are referenced there from the 2009 platform, be brought more up front in a way that expresses a commitment to the achievement of those targets. We'd also like to support the comment made by our colleague from Norway with regard to paragraph 3, where we believe that the role of children in DRR should be recognised and strengthened. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Can I then invite the representative of Slovenia? She's still here. Where is it? Slovenia. No longer? No? That's World Vision, I see. Do you want to speak? Okay. World Vision, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this excellent conference. And again, we do congratulate you for the success of this incredible endeavor. I do represent World Vision and the Children in a Changing Climate Coalition. We'd like to second Norway's suggestion on a separate paragraph on children regarding paragraph 4, and Brazil's recommendation to make specific reference to the importance of securing education. Also, we would like to make reference that investing in a safer future does mean that by 2015, in the 20 highest risk countries, that schools and learning spaces will be made safe, and children will be reached through measures ensuring their protection, and that they would participate in DRR policies and programs. Finally, as mentioned by the delegate to my right from Solomon Islands, we would just recommend a slight expansion of the text in 4.8 to include children in the list of the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Melissa. Can I then invite the representative of Bolivia? You have the floor, sir.
Buenos días, señora presidenta. La delegación del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia felicita su trabajo por la formulación de la propuesta resumen de este evento. Propositivamente tenemos aspectos que pudieran enriquecer el mismo y me permito puntualizar en lo siguiente. En el punto 4, en la segunda línea, pedimos reemplazar la frase preservar nuestras formas de vida por preservar y proteger los equilibrios de la naturaleza y armonía del hombre con la madre tierra para las generaciones presentes y futuras. En el párrafo 4.6, segunda línea, indicar que las asignaciones de recursos nuevos y adicionales deben provenir de la cooperación internacional. Asimismo, en ese mismo punto, 4.6, al finalizar, desearíamos que se remarque lo siguiente. Estas acciones deben enmarcarse en los planes y estrategias de prioridades nacionales. Y por último, después del párrafo 4.11, en continuidad y coherencia con el resumen de la segunda sesión de la plataforma, incorporar un párrafo que indique lo siguiente. Reconocer que entre las principales estrategias para la reducción de desastres de origen hidrometeorológico están las medidas de reducción significativas y domésticas de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, de acuerdo a los mandatos de la Convención Marco de Naciones Unidas sobre Cambio Climático. La razón de este pedido está en función a los impactos que como países en desarrollo estamos soportando y los esfuerzos que en esos términos tenemos. Yo creo que ayudarían a el trabajo que se está realizando en nuestros países. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for those suggestions from Bolivia. And then I invite the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
First of all, I'd like to thank ISDR for producing this comprehensive and detailed document. And also, we welcome the reference to Japan's willingness to host the next WCDR in 2015. And I have a comment on what is said in 4.12 and 4.13, as has been mentioned by Russia, that maybe we need some more clarification on the details of these two groups, maybe especially the relationship between the two groups and the how the group in 4.13 will be involved in the process in 4.12. And having said that, we welcome this actual progress for facilitating our efforts towards 2015, and Japan is willing to participate in this consultative process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I then invite the representative of WMO?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Indeed, I'd like to extend our deep appreciation to you and your team for coordination and planning of such a successful conference. It's been a pleasure to working with you on that. Our comments are twofold. First one pertains to the issue of climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction, as it has been highlighted in paragraph 4.10. One of the major issues that we're discussing in this forum is lack of availability of tailored climate information that can support informed decision-making at local, national, regional, and international levels. This information will have significant influence on investments at those levels, particularly when it comes to the issues of reconstruction and further development. So I would say this issue has impact not only on the discussions during the forum, but also reconstruction studies during the conference. So with that, I'd like to propose some amendments to paragraph 4.10, where I'd like to propose ensure the availability of science-based, tailored, climate-related information through the Global Framework for Climate Services to support informed decision-making at local to national, regional, and international level, stressing the importance of implementation and investments. My second comment addresses the very important conclusion of the very successful report of GAR 2011, where droughts were highlighted as one of the important causes of loss of lives and livelihoods. And I think somewhere in this report, they have to be mentioned two droughts as slow creeping disasters that require much more attention and better integrated management. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good, thank you very much. I think we have now only 3 more speakers, and I suggest that then we actually close the commentary, and we will make some commitments to you for how we will amend this text. So with that, can I invite the representative of UNOSA? Please.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. Let me start by expressing the condolences on behalf of UNOSA to the people of Japan for the great losses they experienced in the recent earthquake and tsunami. I would like to also congratulate you and the UN-ISDR team for conducting this third session of the global platform in a very successful way. I would also like to echo the statements made by Dr. Virginia Murray of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee of ISDR with respect to the use of scientific methods to assess risks and also to assess the effectiveness of measures which are being implemented to reduce such risks. As you are aware, Madam Chairman, several international organizations and regional organizations have set up thematic platforms or partnerships to support national platforms in their efforts to reduce disaster risks. UNOSA and UN SPIDER have set up the SPIDER Global Thematic Partnership, along those ways to promote the use of information, to assess risks and to assess how vulnerabilities may be increasing. I think it's important, Madam Chairman, that somehow in this report, those efforts by institutions in trying to mold their efforts to the framework that was proposed by ISDR in terms of partnerships and platforms as interinstitutional vehicles to assist national platforms are mentioned in the report. Perhaps either in bullet point 4.4, when it comes to providing clear guidance to national platforms. It might be, if I could suggest also, considering whether such thematic partnerships and platforms could be included in items 4.12 and 4.13, as I'm sure that we, as thematic partnerships or platforms, would be willing to contribute to these efforts. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much for that contribution. I'd like to mention to you who is on the speaker list, which is now closed. So no more opportunities. I have Fiji, Vanuatu, Gambia, and I think also WHO had asked for the floor. So after that, everything is email. Can I then ask Fiji to take the floor, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the comprehensive draft report. We are not asking for any changes, but we would just wish to highlight that the fate of the small island developing states have not been acknowledged. We are enveloped by vast ocean, especially the small atolls, then also that are inaccessible to reach. And we ask that our vulnerabilities to natural calamities are enormous by any standard. Small island atolls are continuously exposed and threatened. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir, for that comment. I think we should make an effort to include it, even though you graciously did not request a change. May I invite the representative of Vanuatu, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the respective participants from each countries. I am making a comment, it's not an addition, from point 4.10 regarding the technology. Whereas my fellow men from Fiji also mentioned, we are exposed to a lot of calamities, diverse meteorological hazards and geological hazards. So we could see here that it's quite important that we need to strengthen our monitoring system. So with the past previous sessions, we have involved some private sectors, especially the major IDs companies in the world. So it's one of our crucial components that we need, and we are very weak in this area, where we need more support from the advanced countries in technology to make it as much as possible in assisting countries like our country, a small country. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And can I then invite the representative of Gambia, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Gambian delegation will wish to take this opportunity to thank you very much for this succinct summary and all the good work that we have shown as chair of this prestigious occasion. Under the World Reconstruction Conference, the last page, point 8, which reads participants committed to developing improved systems and instruments for recovery and reconstruction finance. We would want this particular summary to be more explicit. Yes, commitments can be made, but as you know, countries that do not have the wherewithal would find it very difficult to provide the resources and the mechanisms for reconstruction financing. I think in that meeting we have said, and it was recognized that prevention certainly is better than cure. So I think it was said that development partners, of course, and governments should do more to invest more in prevention than in order to ensure that the recovery and the reconstruction costs can be minimized. So this is something we want to see to be more explicit in this particular paragraph. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then we have our final speaker for today, which is the representative of WHO. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to all. We would like to express our deep gratitude to you and to the disaster risk reduction community at this global platform for providing the opportunity in many sessions to put people and their health at the centre of disaster risk reduction, and as a multi-sectoral issue for all. We are making good progress together. As far as the Chair's summary is concerned, we note two statements are referred to in paragraph 3. We would propose that the final version of the Chair's summary include reference to other groundbreaking statements which have been launched here at this global platform, including the joint statement on scaling up the community-based health workforce for their vital role in disaster risk reduction. We would also like to associate ourselves with comments from UNICEF and UNEP in relation to making the targets from 2009 more explicit in the Chair's summary, and particularly in the next steps. Where measurable progress has been made against these targets, we propose that is also exemplified in the text. For example, it has been reported at this global platform that there has been significant progress made on safe hospitals across the world, with over 42 countries with safe hospital programs and more than 630 health facilities which have been assessed for their safety and preparedness in response to these targets. I would also like to propose that in the Chair's summary there is reference made to the promotion of the regional platforms and all of the architecture of the ISDR system, including the thematic platforms, of which one is for health. We look forward to enhancing our collaboration with everybody in order to protect health from disasters, and look forward to seeing you all again in 2 years' time and in many other forums in between time. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much, Jonathan. And that brings to an end your input today, at least to the Chair's summary. There is no doubt that you have definitely contributed to improve the Chair's summary and reflect better all the various perspectives that are important for you. And I think there is probably one particular thing that we will try to reflect is our own commitment to look at all these issues of climate change, investment, etc., through the perspective of local action. So we try to shape the whole, I think, David, you also pointed it out, we try to shape the whole thing so it reads very well in that direction. I may need to continue to rely on some of you to comment on that before we reach the final version, but I'm sure you will contribute to that. So thank you all for that contribution. It is now 12 o'clock, and we are actually going to turn into the very final session here, which will be quite short, I can promise you. There will be I will ask my co-chair, Subida, from the World Bank, to make some comments to what you've just heard, but also how you see us moving on from here. I will, if you agree, invite all the so-called stakeholder representatives to join us here on the stage when we close, if you don't mind moving up here and we find a chair for you. But before that, in principle, we were supposed to watch a video, but I think we'll have to skip that, and we'll switch it on when we reach the end, so that we don't delay and interrupt now. I fear you will start walking out and not coming back. So in order to keep you here, please join me here from the group, and I will then, first of all, ask Subida to give her concluding comments to our Global Platform audience. And then I will also ask a few other speakers to join us here to give you their greetings.